Back on the Don and Mike show, great opportunity here to continue discussions about Omnichannel, as always, powered by SMT Expo for the Don and Mike show. And of course, this is Circle's portion of the show. We also appreciate their sponsorship of the Don and Mike show. And for this, we also appreciate Sierra Live out in Vegas, who does all of the editing of this video portion of this segment. So we appreciate them. And so let's get started. Back on the Don and Mike show on this June 18th, 2021 version, Mike Morrison, National Sales Director for WS Display with Don and Mike show, always powered by SMT Expo. This is our second video attempt for the Don and Mike show, a little different for us. We did one last month with Shawn Garrity, Dave Devito, and we talked a lot about the Omnichannel subjects. And today we continue that conversation. So live from our Omnichannel podcast studio in Las Vegas, I'll turn it over to Don Savela to introduce our guest and move forward with this segment.
Hey, Mike, I appreciate that. Welcome everybody here. It's early in Las Vegas. Today we'd like to, as our segment for this month in Omnichannel, this is our video segment, as Mike said. This episode, we'd like to welcome special guest Chris Scott. Chris is a highly acclaimed and award-winning writer, producer, director, working on a wide variety of television, film, and commercial productions spanning a career of over 30 years. Chris has extensive experience both in the taped and live broadcast field, working exotic locations across the globe. Chris has worked very closely with some of the world's largest ad agencies, directing and delivering highly successful and memorable multimedia campaigns on behalf of his agency partners. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, can you give us a little about your background, a little bit more than, with a career that long? How about a little extra intro from you?
There's a point where I think when you start pushing 50, that technology is 20 years behind you is what you're remembering more than what's supposed to be in front of you. So I appreciate your patience in changing and changing out the backgrounds with us and myself. So, but yeah, pleasure being on. Pleasure seeing you guys.
Well, thanks for coming, and let's dive right into the questions. Chris, what brought you into the broadcast business?
That's I'll abbreviate a long story, but my father was did a lot of marketing for Don Ohlmeyer and Ohlmeyer Communications back in the late 80s. And I was a kid kind of interning, running around and seeing these big broadcast productions going on. I was also in a music scene at the same time and was interning with the studio called Filmus. That was kind of part of the Hit Factory and some big studios back there, dreaming that I was going to be like a rock star or something like that. And in the midst of that, I was watching the post-production process on some major films. So from the artistic side, we said, hey, there's no money in punk rock. Let me go after these fields. And went to University of Central Florida, and then went to Full Sail, which at the time was a vocational school that had the first nonlinear editors out there. And I found that very interesting. And I jumped in a car, drove to Central Florida, got a collegiate career, and kind of bounced right back out and started working in places like CBS and the broadcast world back in New York. And that led to some time in USA Networks, working in their production departments back in the Kay Kaplovitz days. And it was very interesting. It was an early part of the Sci-Fi Channel, doing work with them. So one of their original employees, technically. And just from that point on, I just got fascinated with the scale of big broadcasts and live events, and kind of how it just, became content eventually. And never looked back. Went from there into a lot of commercials and advertising, kind of got back to the spirit of wanting to direct and be a bit more on the creative side after having a corporate run and getting the understanding of that side, which I think is very valuable, because learning that side of the business is critical to know how to function in the other side, and to know that, it's not just big creative dreams. There's a lot of money and numbers behind things. And did a lot of national campaigns, Silk Soy Milks of the world, and Bud Light commercials and denture commercials and stuff. And then just started getting into what was originally the concept of branded entertainment, and started seeing advertisers slowly kind of look for the content, that C word versus here's your 15-second or your 30-second spot and your budget, and deliver it, and and start with a test spot and then go for the full up and the whole routine. So that's somewhere around in that area was when I met Shawn, and we started doing great things together. And so that's the short version. The long version, you need another 2 hours on here.
I'll tell you what, Chris, I'm a big fan of the Sci-Fi Channel. What was your first opportunity utilizing your artistic and broadcast specialties to work closely with brands and their agencies?
From the sense of non-traditional commercials, right, were satisfying, especially in the paycheck world. But directing a commercial, you're this extension of a board of advertising folks that are sitting behind you. With the first experience I felt where this was a branded content player or something that was outside of traditional advertisements was really in the action sports world. I did a feature film called Snowblind that I directed. It actually did pretty well, went out in the theatrical, had a good theatrical run in the States, played I think 37 countries. And it was a film that was funded by a company called Snow Country, which was the big weather reports back then, but a big this is when the snowboard craze was blowing up. And I decided to do a documentary. It wasn't featuring big pros and all these folks that were going to the Olympics. It was featured a blind snowboarder, paraplegic snowboarder, kids that were trying to break the scene. It had a more human being approach to the film, but it was a sponsored film at the end of the day. And I think the success of it was because it connected with people that were really interested in this sport, and at the time it was just like explosion. It was just everybody was snowboarding type thing, and it leveraged it well. And then that kind of transcended into a career of doing films for like Transworld, Burton, MTV Sports, all kinds of folks that were big brands that were creating content because that's what was closer to their user base versus just going out there and creating a really fancy like 30-second or 2-minute commercial. And that's when there was stories behind people involved that use these products or use these brands, and they were more interesting, I think, to folks that were wanting to buy them. And that was the connectivity, and it was outside and it was organic. You didn't have to force something down the throat or try and hide a brand or something like that. When I did a Burton spot, it's because people wanted to watch an hour of Burton's, top snowboarders. Transworld was able to bring brands in because they're already a brand themselves, and it was pretty organic. So that was, that's what I started realizing, like, this is going to become a norm in 15 years or less, and when you can do it organically and it's entertaining and you're not distracted by something that's a brand, then you won, and that's a creative challenge. But that was the beginning of when I really, that genre was very simple to do because it was okay to do it to the people that were in the actual scenes and all the hip kids and people that were in action sports, so
can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
The theme of what I'm hearing is that you're doing a lot of high impact type of content that grabs attention. And that seems to be a trend moving today. A lot of things that are happening in broadcast, as you will have seen, and it is like the next high impact shock and awe to get an audience involved. When we go into trade show, live event, that type of arena, do you see that as maybe a challenge for branding to try to get someone's attention versus the old, you mentioned denture commercials, things like that, which seemingly has a stream of following, just your normalization? And does that seem like it's going to change in the future as you try to do this omni-channel broadcast approach in different arenas to try to get impact, if that question makes sense?
No, it does. And I think it is getting easier. The action sports comparison is even the reason I brought it up is because it was already kind of organic. If you go to any place to buy, snowboards or skateboards, or you go to an event, that's where these communities get together, surfing in particular. There's brands everywhere. So I think what I hear that was always kind of missed by sometimes these big ad agencies. It was like, hey, we're going to do this really creative way of no one's going to know that this is it's like a denture brand, like a brand like that, or a product like that's always going to have challenges because there's nothing interesting or sexy content wise around dentures unless you're really going to go, out of the boundaries of probably what there was a safe place for a denture brand, right? It's like extreme comedy or something. With live events, with which, I think is the category that in sector, you guys are really in. I think it depends on the actual, what it is that's looking to be integrated into it that tells the story. Some things are organic and some things aren't. Like back to action sports, there's brands everywhere. So it was normal for, what was trending to be involved with a brand. Live events and concerts, brands are everywhere. So it's not a harsh thing to be building Coca-Cola content around a live event that's concert based. E3s, that is brand galore when you look at that type of event. So it's not obnoxious or forcing anything in anyone's face. But I do think over time, and comparing to when Shawn, how many meetings have we been in talking about, how do we integrate a brand kind of seamlessly into the content without anybody knowing? That's the trick of all this. But I think over time now, and especially from 10, 12 years ago to now, it's now widely accepted because you're also in a short form, like theater these days. It's okay that, such and such presents big celebrity doing something in 30 seconds on Instagram and everyone's fine with it, and younger demos, which is always the challenge, to not offend or not make it feel like the corporate man is in there and all that shit. So I think there's that's becoming more accepting and it becomes easier. I think anything live, content wise, is the easiest bridge to cross to do branded entertainment, if you ask me. And I think you're already seeing that. I think coming out of COVID too, because a lot of these people these big agencies have to stop and reassess that the 15-second spot is not doing what it used to. And I think everybody knows that. It's a dying thing, and how these things are integrated are more important than ever.
Good challenge, like you're bringing up, and Chris and I have been in rooms. Dave Devito and I have been in several rooms right now where we literally have clients, whether it's ad agencies, brand direct, media companies, companies on the B2B side. It's kind of interesting. Like they have $2 million it's parked. They don't know what to do with it. How do we bring that $2 million to life? Because if we don't give them the big idea, it's not going to get deployed. So, as you look at coming out of COVID, I know you're hearing a lot of it. I'm hearing it from a lot of our peers. It's like the money's just frozen, or if it's coming out, it's much smaller and much more cautious. But we're literally sitting in rooms where there are millions of dollars, and they're like, okay, so what do we do with it and how? And it's at the CEO level. Dave and I were on a presentation yesterday with one of the leading sports publishing brands in the world, and coming out with one of their marquee campaigns that happens year over year. And it's reshaping everything. It's the broadcast. It's how does a live event work? What does it really look like in today's world? I don't know if you saw yesterday with Victoria's Secret, the angels are gone and now they're activists. So you're taking a whole dramatic shift of what does talent mean? What does message mean? What do you stand for? How's that going to respond to your marketplace? How does that drive content now? How does it move to live? It's really an exciting and also a very scary time because it's a new paradigm. And how do you make it authentic, to Chris's point? How do you motivate those dollars? And then how do you credibly attach those dollars to deliverables with confidence, from the client side?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Shawn, and it brings up a question about finance and budget. Chris, One of the main things that's always been a challenge in any industry, including the traditional broadcast, is budget and finance. How appealing is it to have the opportunity to blend the budgets you would generally have in the broadcast only arena, to blend the budgets in total with the B2B sector that can range into the tens of millions of dollars? I'm a traditional trade show guy, so this is sort of a new concept that sounds, I know it's not new, but it seems to be embraced more and more now.
Yeah, it's well, it's very appealing because the to make some of these big ideas that guys like I have, you're always limited in some form of debt financing, or a studio's got to give you a minimum guarantee or some bankable asset, or you got a rich uncle or a crazy sheik or something, right? So you do these are these budgets you get, all of a sudden they're to make these things, or they're never enough when you kind of look at it. That's why you see some of these feature films and concert tours are hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's very appealing, but it's also the word I hear so much, Shawn and Dave can attest to it, is 360, right? And it's everything is a 360 approach. So the concert has a broadcast event, has a roll-ins, has Instagram content, has marketing stuff that's 6 months prior to the event. It's all 360 stuff, and that includes one big budget that goes into micro budgets. And what's appealing about that, corporate dollars, especially in big brands, usually have more money than anyone, outside of a bank, so in banks, you have to justify these tons of items to go make this thing and make sure there's bankability to get that money back somewhere out on it, whether it's box office or rights or foreign or something. So it's very appealing to me because the creative part of the world is opening to this. And as I was stating before, as it becomes more common, you're going to eventually see feature films in movie theaters that are bought to you by somebody. And it's a corporate dollar. It's not a private financing piece. It's not. Now, that was always the sacred, and that part of independent film and things like that. Now you're already seeing it in documentaries that are getting nominated for Academy Awards, are being sponsored by somebody or some brand or something. And it's as going back to what Shawn was saying, messaging is critical. And if you get the messaging right and you create something authentic, it doesn't matter. The brand will be accepted actually better than any type of impact they can imagine, and those are the challenges, or those are the things that we as the creators to it need to apply. And whether it's a trade show or a big broadcast or anything, that the word authentic is critical. And those are the bridges that people like us have to cross.
Well, I think you bring up a big point there, Chris, and Mike, from your side of your experience. At the end of the day, I've talked to brands that have tens of millions of dollars. Some of them are close to $100 million, producing videos and producing content facing into an event for an audience that's going to come. And there's a checkbox of, okay, now how are we going to beam that out? But it's an interesting point when you think about how much money our clients spend creating these vignettes and these sets. They're beautiful, and their best talent and their best experts are here to present those goods and wares. They don't do anything, no cameras. They could be saying, come on, show up at 6 in the morning. We're gonna do a demo. We're gonna do a tutorial. We're gonna do some unique content. We're gonna do an exclusive release out. That they're just missing that you have all these sets, all these vignettes, all these storylines. Your best talent from your company from across the globe are there. Some of your best influencers, some of your best buyers are there, and you're not doing anything with it. The cameras aren't there. It's really crazy. I always bring it back to the most simple point. The Super Bowl's happening. Oh, we're sold out. Don't bring the cameras. There will not be a broadcast of the Super Bowl because the stadium is sold out. It just doesn't make sense, especially when you're looking at someone with a AWS, a $90 million budget, and that allocation of that physical infrastructure against their content and broadcast is just such an opportunity. It's pretty staggering when you think about it. $5 million. If you carved out $5 million from that massive budget, what production values can you get on site across an event like that? I mean, it could be cinematic and phenomenal, right, Chris?
Yeah, it's extraordinary how much, I'll temper this word the right way. I don't want to say wasted money, but unused dollars, right? That is probably a better way of describing it, that you see constantly, that there's still people that are going to sit in a cookie cutter world. That's because that's the job they know, and instead of deep diving into something and saying, yeah, out of $90 million, whereas throwing $500,000 into content that's evergreen, that could have a lasting impression on an audience for years, versus a 3 or 4 day live event at a B2B industry show, and but I think that is what's evolving, is that people are waking up just to say, yeah, throw $1.5 million and that 90 million into a live concert, that's part of that show or that stage or that set, or not. It's not difficult to design around that. The good thing about, filming content or broadcast or whatever you slap on it is it's usually the cheapest part of everything, unless you got like an A-list actor or something like that. So technology has really become, look at us, we're doing this. When I was in the industry, would be a closed circuit thing that would cost about $400,000, with a live satellite and satcoms and point to points and 4 studios or 3 studios. Like it's unheard of now. Like me thinking about this in the late 90s, sitting in CBS studios and getting an internal budget to do this, the process would be absurd. And now we're jumping on something called Zoom, so the advent of these technologies really progresses what we're talking about here, to just do it. And the messaging and the creative is the most important commodity, not, cameras and things of that nature.
What do you think, Mike? What are your insights on that?
Shawn, you and I have bantered back and forth about the frustration in the B2B world at a show, trade show specifically, but other events, of the lack of cameras. I've heard you say that before, and I will agree with you. But my curiosity is, and it's, when I think of this, I think about SEMA show, for instance. I know the visuals I see are like these 30-minute shows that go and recap the event. They go around, they do spot interviews, and they bring an enlightenment of what's actually happening at the show. That's what I think about with broadcast. But when you were saying that we're missing the opportunity to bring a camera in and do like a tutorial on a product or a service for an exhibitor, for instance, why do you think? Is it because of time? And I'll use the word ignorance in a way, not to demean, but to just say, just not knowing about it? Or why do you think it's not as prevalent as maybe it should be, especially now with technology being as cost effective as it is?
I think it's old habits, and I'll let Dave chime in, follow this up. And it's old habits, it's biases, it's limitations. And look, a lot of people in our industry love those damn table saws. I got to cut that wood. And by the way, I put crates in my warehouse. I have a lot of space, so a forklift's got to be able to lift it up. I got to be able to cut it. Let's throw a logo on that thing. And I've got people on site that are going to unload that truck and put it up. It's the same thing in the ad agency side of it. Chris and I talked about this many times. It used to be that you'd go into a multi-million-dollar studio, you'd have every union jurisdiction, you'd have every category of org chart to do that. And you could have a young college guy or gal in her basement producing that commercial in today's world. And the ad agencies didn't want to let it go because it was such a big part of their revenue. They couldn't confess to the basement scenario because they were too wired the other way. And I think for our industry, we have too much square footage, too many table saws, and too much bias that we have to move it that way. So I think bringing people like Dave Devito into our industry, Chris Scott, and us into theirs too, by the way, that's the omni-channel marriage that allows you to reallocate your biases, your buckets, how they spend, and being more aggressive with them, especially with Chris's point of today's new technologies and everybody knowing how to use them. They're trained now. They're not as afraid. But interesting to get your thoughts on it, Dave.
No, Shawn, I agree with 100%. I think that the word that you just used is the bucketization of marketing. You know, people have their nice little lanes that they've been very successful with for a long time, and that's fine. But I think what we're seeing over the last year or two plus is that people are recognizing that they've got to be different. I mean, the past year and a half has been obviously a huge challenge in the world. And, you know, it was obviously terrible, but it woke people up. People are awake now. They understand that they've got to be a lot more open-minded. And this is the opportunity that brands and marketers have started to embrace. That's the excitement of what we're doing here.
Chris,
Yeah, and I think now, man, you're seeing it more than ever. I mean, again, Sean, Dave, we've been in meetings with major top 5 celebrities, you know, with thinking way beyond the box. Like, how do we bring a sponsor or a big brand into something that's more than just a little broadcast series? They're literally social impact movements, basically. Like, you know, again, talking about that 10 years ago was foreign, 5 years ago, literally. And now it's almost, you're starting to see these agents or agencies. What are they now? Media investment companies. I always find that interesting. The word ad agency is probably, you know, about to die soon, you know. But for folks like that, folks like us, you know, the doers, the makers, you know, creative guys, the guys at the table saws, that's a much more interesting place to be in, instead of trying to force all these circles and squares into each other. I find it really compelling. You know?
That's a great point, Chris, is that it goes both ways. Not just the brands and agencies, but the talent is also becoming more open-minded, which you know better than anyone.
Yeah.
And that's where that marriage is going to be a lot more powerful.
Yeah. I hear all the time, because I'm around enough actors to drive myself nuts, but they all talk to them about themselves as a brand as much as the craft of acting. From an altruistic, like, you know, real, you know, hardcore artist, sometimes that sounds like selling out, or that used to be. Now it's not anymore. You know, now it's part of, I've got to utilize this form I have in front of a camera in a much bigger way. And you're seeing it across the board with, you know, the Rocks and the Kevin Harts and people in DC movies and comic book movies. They're leveraging this thing in a massive way, and it's opportunistic for other brands to kind of come into it. I mean, so it's a big forum, and it works across the board, from showing up at Comic Cons and live shows to literally to just daily content. You know, it's pretty crazy.
Chris, both you and Shawn have known each other for several years. What would you both say is the best success you've had recently working together with Omnichannel, combining the brand and the broadcast?
Yeah, that's recently, I think I don't know we can fully say the name of the talent, but we're shaping a really amazing program around a very big actor comedian, right? And it's been really fun doing that with Shawn and Dave, and you know, starting at one place and getting now to multiple channels of potential revenue. Shawn and I's successes go back. One of them, to me, when I look back, a very proud experience was with General Motors NBC, and Shawn and I, we created a series called Great American Hell Challenge, which was put us right into the thick of, and this was a while ago. This is when Brandon Entertainment was minimum. It was brought to you by sponsorship in the open of a broadcast play, but this was truly integrated into GE. I said General Motors, my apologies, but who was the majority owner of NBC at the time, that they had these health initiatives they wanted to get across you know, different cities, and we put together a competition health show, a very simple, you know, name, Great American Health Challenge, and you know, it was each borough was competing against each other, and it was very simple and not recreating the wheel from a TV broadcast perspective, but it was a very natural integration of what GE and NBC were trying to do, and we were the guys who came in with the pitch and really put it together. And from ground up, it was a fun experience, because to me, this was the initiative from the corporate mandate down to folks like us that then returned it in a very high successful rate together. Shawn, I don't know, we've got a couple of them out there for sure, but those are the ones to think about that are a lot of fun.
Really on target. What was interesting about it was an agency that was approached by NBC to come up with a solution for GE. GE had 7 figures to allocate to an initiative like this, and NBC was pretty frustrated. They couldn't really come up with the right idea to get the money. They had pitched things and they just weren't getting it. GE wasn't committing. So they went to an agency who came to us and said, okay, what is it? You know, Chris really was the brainchild of creating this Great American Health Challenge, which translated to 12 episodes, which we casted, all production deliverable for their broadcast and the airing. But through the location work that we did, Bed Bath Beyond on a sleeping challenge, they're a sponsor, the Vision Council, Whole Foods, just a wide range.
The salad company, Chop,
all kinds of challenges that we now created, and that allowed us to engage brands. So, you know, from the beginning, we really saw that as a great opportunity. You know, Chris has mentioned one of the top entertainers in the world right now. It sees himself as a brand, and we're actually shaping a joint venture agency working with this celebrity. And it's basically, I want a car, go get it. We want to do this, go get it. We want to shape a tour, go get it. So, you know, we have a fun internal term we call Trojan horses. You know, it's nice to be able to call auto brand X that really wouldn't be talking to us for any normal reason, but when we say we're representing personality X, he wants a car, like to talk to you. It's amazing how fast the elevator brings us up. So, you know, the objective for any one of us is always to go up in the elevator to the C floor, not down to procurement. That P floor is really a bad one. So, you know, again, we see this as great opportunities. We're all marketers. We're all looking for the right things, but it's how do you differentiate yourself? How do you bring true value to your clients? But again, you know, the pitch we had yesterday was CEO, head of editorial, head of content, head of ad sales, CMO. And again, if it wasn't shaped with the right people from our side that speak to each one of those disciplines, you know, we don't hold the CEO long on that one. So I think there are a lot of opportunities ahead. It's very exciting. I think the NBC opportunity is really a great example. And, you know, Chris has actually brought us in to work on a 2-time Emmy Award-winning philanthropic show that brings together top philanthropies by episode, 30 episodes coming up. But it is our opportunity. Our team is reaching out to brands and agencies about bringing brands to episodes, support those episodes, and then obviously producing relevant content and connectivity, you know, based on their mission. So really broad horizons and exciting times ahead.
Yeah, exciting. We need it. Hey, Chris, what's the best advice you could give our audience as we continue to evolve and focus on the needs of our clients today and more importantly, tomorrow?
Learn everything or participate in every angle of this industry. It used to be, I used to make a lot of money going and being a director of a commercial, and the rest didn't really matter, you know, wasn't my job, you know. That's the way it was, you know. I lucked out and I had a really good corporate career and kind of grew up on that side, in the sense of like knowing what the reasoning of the dollars behind that project that was hiring me for, you know, the way I look at it now, way overpaid rates, you know, but you'd be able to get them because I'm a union guy, right? But now, to me, anyone going into this or working in this, learn the 360, understand how the brands are thinking, how the middlemen are thinking, where the budgets are really being spent, what's critical about the messaging, you know, whether it's broadcast, live, or all of it, it is all going to latch together. And I think there's going to be finite approaches to budgets, that there is a campaign coming from someone, and all of this needs to be addressed. And the more you could acknowledge that and know how they kind of all intertwine and work together is my best advice for anybody getting into this. When I still lecture at a couple colleges when I can. And it used to be like, here's how a film works. Now it's like, hey guys, learn all this shit, because if you don't, you're just limiting yourself, and get a fundamental understanding that the creativity and the actual budgets do need to be more aligned than ever. Because it's about these brands and these events and these people spending they're all going to want to make sure it's all lining up correctly. I think the successes of me, Shawn, and Dave are predicated on guys that understand that. There's still a lot of directors, like in creative directors, and people that don't even want to acknowledge the other side. And that's just stupid to me, and you see it in feature films, you see it in show running at TV and all this. Like, those people are dinosaurs in a couple of years, and it doesn't matter anymore. Movie stars on posters, big name directors, all that stuff it's about what's the actual show, the series, the concert, and the brand messaging is what's going to be more important than any of it.
It's interesting, Mike, and I know you recall this. I remember coming to the industry in the late 80s. You'd go to meet with a client, you go in their conference room and you'd say, okay, and you'd sit quietly, but you had your questions. Okay, how many conference rooms are you going to want? Are you going to want a hanging sign? Are you going to need a reception room? Okay, how many demo stations are you going to need? And then we listened. It was almost like we were reporters, and they'd give us the story. And then we go back and put pretty colors on it and our best interpretation of what that was. Cool stuff. Hey, by the way, there's going to be a beveled edge. That's a Pierce cut. Oh my gosh, you're going to love that one. And in today's world, really, the one who talks first wins. And when we go into a client or to an agency and you're sitting at that room, the days of saying, okay, well, thanks for having us, how can we help you? You lost. It's already over. To go into the room and say, thanks for having us. By the way, here's a clear canvas. We'll have an action item today, or don't have us back. And let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what you're looking to do. We have some ideas for you. And it's a really exciting thing. I said, well, we're very excited about that. Have at it. And, we just brought on a couple of really talented people that are experts in anything you can imagine, large scale event. And from a training perspective, but it is kind of used to the client coming and saying, here's where we are now, do your best work with that, off we go. And being in the position, it's scary to say, okay, no, we're the idea. They don't have an idea, we're it. So take that clear canvas, let's stare at it. Yeah, I've got about 10 seconds. What's the big idea? Now go. But that's where the fun is. That's where Omnichannel is, because by the time it comes to us, it's not Omnichannel, it's projects, which is fine, but really helping clients to shape that clear canvas, color it, define it, and bring it to life for them. And by the way, now it's, I got to bring in PR, I got to bring in advertising, I got to bring in digital. By the way, I have to bring my ad agents. They're going to need to be a part of this. That's when it's really great. So, I think he who or she who speaks first wins. If you're waiting, it's going to be a long wait. And by the way, hit the P button. You're back down in procurement. And congratulations. It's
and that goes. Another advice part. The B to the A of the advice thing is bring value. Make sure you understand the value added before going into anything, any pitch or it could be anything in the content world. Even saying the word content a couple of years ago, I was one of these guys, like, I hate that word. It's a film, it's a TV. You want to be this altruistic artist, but it's what it is, and it's great that it's that, because it's more opportunity than it's ever been. And again, whether it's a live experience, a VR or AR experience, or a concert or a TV show or a film, it's what it is. And content is thriving more than ever. It's the deliverable of messaging, and know the value going into something that you're bringing, then you'll be stronger in whatever that place is. So that's my second part of any advice. I could probably go to Z with advice, so I'll cut it off at there.
I will say this on your statement, Shawn. I think that there's a concern among CEOs and decision makers who have not stepped into this arena, that I don't think they understand what the ROI is all about, and that the high impact, because they're so used to your example that you gave with the canvas and the pretty colors and this is what we're going to build. And now we're going to take an electronic medium, bring that to a CEO who has not had any experience with this, most likely. And they may be captured in the impact, but I think you also have to show them what that ROI is going to be at the end of the day. Even though you don't know exactly what it's going to be, you're going to have to share with them those case studies of, well, this company did this, and this is what they got in return. And then I think this, just speculating here, that CEOs will be more acceptable to talking about moving into omnichannel at the B2B level and the trade show, if you can give those success stories. And I think right now it's happening more and more, and those success stories are out there, and whoever's in the sales role is going to have to explain that to them, because they don't know exactly what you're talking about, in my opinion.
I think you bring up a great point. A friend of mine has a great saying: 10% of people are dying to be discovered, 90% of people are afraid they're going to be found out. And the problem is, these CEOs, we're talking to big corporations, do know digital, they know broadcast, and now you're going and talking to them, and they're saying, okay, let me ask you 2 quick questions, and I'm going to find out who you really are. It's hard. And there was a comment that, hey, I know this whole omni-channel thing, smoke and mirrors, but God bless it, at least you're out there saying and doing something. It's cute. And it's like, yeah, okay, we'll take that one. I said, but by the way, it better not be smoke and mirrors, because this is it. And it is hard. And I always say, the day you say that you're really going to commit to being truly omni-channel, you've got a 2 to 4 year road ahead of you to get there. It's very hard. The disciplines, the trust, the organic, holistic nature of how it comes together. But how you accelerate that is by telling yourself the truth. You're not the best at anything, and you can't be the best at everything in the world. You got to go out of your own skin. You got to go past your own walls. And you've got to executive produce outcomes. You can't produce all those things from your own walls. If you're truly omni-channel, you're going to bring in a PR agency. You're going to bring in a specialist in a sector. You're going to bring in a celebrity, a personality. It's really looking at any given scenario and saying, where do we go in this big world, and how do we shape that solution for this requirement? So but that's what our industry has always been about. That really is our core competency, is seeing a requirement or a problem and fixing it. And again, I'm really excited for our industry. And Mike, the last thing I'm going to share, Donna and Mike, if you take a bunch of truths together, do they equal a truth? And usually they do. And the summer's been tough for our industry historically. Very few companies in our industry have successfully cracked the code of summer year over year. Maybe a project comes or it doesn't, but it's hard. We've been in 15 months of this pandemic. The PPP is over, in my opinion. I don't see another one on the horizon. We are opening up, thank goodness, but the summer's still the summer. And the only thing that helped our industry from the summer was the 3rd, 4th quarter, and the 1st quarter coming into the cash flow in July, August, September. I believe most of us are seeing the same thing. That money's not there. The budgets are smaller. The clients are coming back slower. We're hearing that Asia may open in October, which hopefully will affect shows like CES well. But summer's terrible generally, and I hope that's not the truth now. Everyone's doing great, but the fall's not going to be the fall it was. The 1st quarter is going to be better, but still not the same. A lot of the companies in our industry are going to struggle. We have been struggling. So the strategic dollars are the bigger dollars. They're the fastest dollars. And they're now, we're seeing that projects are getting approved now for a month from now. $1 million projects, $2 million projects. Our industry just can't sit and wait. It's kind of like that who moved my cheese. I'm concerned for companies that went through 15 months, now going through the summer, now going through the 3rd, 4th quarter, and the 1st, saying, I'm just hoping and believing things are going to pick up. And Mike, you shared it from the EDPA meeting in Atlanta. Somebody said, what about the variant? And somebody said, if this variant hits and there's an issue, we're all going to be gone. It just can't be, right? I mean, we've got to be better than that. Our industry's smarter than that. So just looking at all the facts, it has to be strategy, and it has to be diversification, because you can't hope or not hope that something comes back. We gotta be shaped differently,
Yeah, and Shawn, we really appreciate the talent that your organization has, and the way we can help explain things to the rest of the industry, new people to the industry, and outsiders, looking in at what we do. Guest after guest. Any ideas who we might have coming up in July?
Yeah, we've got some exciting guests coming up. Dave, is our next episode about ESG?
I believe it might be, yes.
Yeah, so the next one is really going to focus on environment and social governance, and it speaks to how corporations now are graded. Literally, you get a grade, and it's on your website if you're a publicly traded company. Your finance score, it's like your finance score, except worse or better, however you want to see it. If you don't have a good ESG score, you can't get bank loans. There are major Fortune 100 companies that will not work with you. Your employees will probably not want to stay with you. They'll go to another company. There's a movement coming that's literally graded. You're hearing about global taxes being a consideration where if you're a citizen of the world, you're going to pay 15% tax. It's a pretty wild thing heading up. So we've got a couple of guests we're going to be bringing on that will speak to that. And when it was brought up to us 2 years ago, we had no idea what it meant. And once it was explained to us, it was really a groundbreaker, because companies are going to have to rebrand, reposition, and reconfigure so many things in the materials they use, the decisions they make, the marketing they do, the tours they do, inward facing campaigns they're going to have to do. So we're going to bring it up as something to pay attention to, but we're also going to bring it up as a category and a specialty that could create new revenues for an industry like ours.
And that's it for this episode, guys. I appreciate you all, and thanks for sharing your knowledge there on the broadcast world and everything.
Any day. Thank you very much. It was a fun conversation.